Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the OSINT Curious Webcast podcast. I am Micah Hoffman, and I am joined with my lovely OSINT Curious members here. We've got Nico. Say hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Cool. And Matthias.
Hey, this is Matthias, also known as MWOsint.
Welcome, welcome. And Technisette's with us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Technisette.
Cool. And we have actually a huge number of attendees. I think that they're here probably to listen to our guest. Nico, would you go ahead and introduce our guest for us?
Yes. Well, today is a guest I've met in person a few times. It's Aliam Leroy. Please pronounce it right for me later on. You're with the BBC African Eye, which, well, we all know you work there with Benjamin Strick also, and you do awesome news for people who, who their voice needs to be heard all over the world, I guess. Could you please tell us who are you and what got you started in this field of open source intelligence gathering?
Sure. It's a very, first of all, thank you, Nico, for the introduction. That was very well pronounced because definitely not an easy first name. Ayom Leroy is a tough one even for French people. So hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored to join this amazing podcast and this group of people. First, a bit about me. So yeah, my name is Ayom Leroy. I'm from France and I'm an open source investigator for BBC Africa Eye, which is the Africa focused investigative unit of the BBC. It was launched so when was it launched? Like sort of in 2017. And the first documentary that came out was in 2018. So within that, it's a documentary unit doing investigation, but within that, we've got sort of special forces unit of just OSINT investigators, being Benjamin Strick, who I believe already joined for that podcast. I think he was invited once or will soon be, I guess. And the other one is Bertram Hill. So the three of us just specialize in bringing the open source OSINT tools and techniques to Africa investigation. And as to how I started in regards to Bellingcat, those are the guys who really sort of open the open source OSINT world to me. And it started when it was in 2014. I was at university, McGill University in Montreal. And I don't know, one day, like a friend mentioned, you know, have you heard about this open source collective named Bellingcat? And I thought I would start looking on their website. So that was after Brown Moses, they had already started crowdfunding to set up Bellingcat, and they just started doing it. And the first investigation, the first case, which made them so famous, was obviously MH17. And so I started reading some of their reports, and I thought, like, oh man, it's unbelievable. Those guys, just from the computer, are being able to forensically follow this book missile system all across Ukraine and then back into Russia. And I thought, okay, that's exactly what I want to do with my life. At the time, I was, I didn't know whether I wanted to be a journalist, whether I wanted to start with a sort of intelligence and serve my country as an intelligence officer, and then I found that basically OSINT sort of does everything. I can do intelligence, I can do journalism, and the techniques, it's just what you can find is amazing. So that really, yeah, the MH17 investigation that Bellingcat produced for me, that was an eye-opener to open source investigation and the power and what it can do.
So you just said at that moment in time, you didn't know whether you wanted to be a journalist or maybe be an intelligence analyst. Does that mean that you were trained as an intelligence analyst, or did you follow any schooling on that subject matter?
Course after my undergrad, I did. So yeah, I wasn't sure, whether I wanted to do journalism. So I thought I would do a graduate program at King's College in London, and it was in conflict security. But some of my friends were in intelligence. It's actually quite funny because in that program were Christian Tribert and Nick Waters. So I met them all there. And, we started talking about Bellingcat, and we all know Christian Tribert for all the work he's done, and Nick Waters as well for all the work they've done at Bellingcat. And so it was at the King's was in a way like a sort of like where a lot of journalists and, military officers and former intelligence officer, people wanted to be in the intelligence. So in the military sort of gather in that university. And so I thought that was quite amazing. And at the time, I was studying at King's. It was in 2015, so they were the infamous terrorist attacks in France. and also the start. So I don't know if you watch it all before, but you should highly recommend the TV series, French TV series called The Bureau, about the French intelligence service and their work. It's amazing TV series. So all of that, for a while I thought, okay, maybe I want to get into intelligence, and part of our program did talk about security and military, but then I thought I'll never be a good intelligence officer. I'm not organized enough, and thought I would follow sort of more the path of the NGO and then journalism. So I started working at Global Witness, and there I was implementing open source investigation there at Global Witness. And before I'd done a bit of work with Bellingcat. That's how I started.
Yeah, awesome. So when you've seen both worlds, you've seen the intelligence community, or at least met a lot of people of that world, and you've met a lot of journalists. From an open source intelligence perspective, what are the...
Oh, sorry, I lost the question.
Sorry,
I
will repeat it again. So you were you have had a good look at both worlds, so the intelligence community and the journalist community, and they both conduct open source intelligence. What, in your opinion, is the main difference between those two worlds, who basically do the same thing?
That's a very good question. In a way, there are so many similarities, because it's sort of, there is the same process, the same idea. I think sometimes journalism might not be as structured in terms of their tool, or like how they organize their work and how they organize investigation in general. I consider journalists as a bit more messy than intelligence officers, and I myself am a bit more messy. But they share a lot of similarities in the term of the tools they use, the aim. You've got the sort of the OSINT framework is kind of similar in journalism and in intelligence. I think where it differs is in regards to the goal and the end goal of intelligence gathering their pieces of elements in order to provide information and enable the politicians and also the military organization, etc., to make good decisions to protect the nation and the citizens against external threats. Whereas journalism would be much more in like gathering, and that's what we do at BBC Africa, gathering intelligence evidence of wrongdoings and of harm being done, whether it's about corruption, whether it's about conflict, and then put that in the open, in the public interest, in order to change policies and politics for good. Not saying that journalism is just for good and intelligence is bad people. It's just the sort of end goal is different in a way. One is to defend nation and citizens against external threats or internal threats. Another one is to expose wrongdoing in the public. And that's often where maybe intelligence might clash with the journalists. Journalists always wanted to bring every piece of information public, and that can be quite risky in some type of journalism, or more activism like WikiLeaks, let's say, where it's like there's no thought about the risk to people on the ground, and that can be highly dangerous. Obviously, as journalists, we've got at the BBC, we've got a set of rules and that we need to follow to prevent that to happen.
Yeah. So in your investigations, do you solely rely on open source information, or do you also have some sources that kind of act as a human source, with something that we're I think seeing more and more when it comes to Bellingcat, that it's not just only online investigations, but a bit more to it? So
we do, yeah, we mix the both. So Benjamin Strick, Bertram Hill, and myself, we try to really focus on the open source first. Sort of, it's most of our investigation for that core unit, of that small unit, within Africa, is led by open source investigation and is complemented by underground sources or people we talk to. But there is also the rest of the unit at BBC Africa is more traditional documentary unit. So they focus on sources, running sources on the ground, doing undercover camera filming and secret filming, and sting operation, and then the open source complements, and we're here as well to complement the same. So it's a good balance in between the two. And what I love about this team is really we've got a sort of a range of skills and aptitude that when you combine them together makes for great investigation, because often we find that open source can lead us so long, but then we need that person on the ground, with that access, with that document that will bring it to further and will open us the gates to to the findings and we are after. But also that can happen the other way around, where sources on the ground, testimonies can be confusing, can elements are missing, and that's where the open source can bring some clarity and some sort of banging findings, as Ben likes to say about open source investigation. So we do a bit of both, but yeah, myself I would specialize more into the open source.
So one of the things that I've noticed is, I mean, I've watched some of the output of the BBC Africa Eye, and I mean, it's so impressive and so polished. It's beautiful to watch. It's not just engaging from the OSINT perspective, but the graphics are great, and I know that a lot of that is BBC. One of the things that I always wondered was, how do you get the topics to research with all of the wrongdoing that needs to be exposed, especially when you're talking about in just a whole continent? How do you pick and choose which things to investigate?
So for us, that's a very good question. It's for us, we find actually that it's quite interesting working and doing open source investigation, focusing on Africa, because it's true that traditionally most of the open source investigator would focus on the Middle East, especially Europe, Eastern Europe, and we don't have as many open source investigators looking into what's happening in Africa. There are and more coming, or Latin America. So it's a very I love there's so much, in a way feels like the field is open and you're the first one to get into it. So that's very interesting. But we find that in a lot of countries, it's so hard to find pieces of elements. Like, I don't know, if we take Burundi, for example, the sort of online penetration, internet penetration, phone device, computer penetration is so low that we get so little information that makes it very tough. So that's one example. One element is also, availability of open source information in terms of the African continent. That determines some places we can look into and some we can't. So that's one element. The second one is the type of wrongdoing. So in a way, our editors are quite strict at Africa, and they don't want us just to make some little findings. We need to nail the people. So if it feels like, I don't know, let's say someone, let's take the case Anatomy of a King, for example, that was into the murder of 2 young women and 2 young children by Cameroonian soldiers. Our editors, it was quite interesting to see, like, in a way, we found, first we started working with a group of open source investigators, independent open source investigators. We first found, where it happened. And in terms of open source, like, as an open source investigator, you've got that, you want to get it out, like, that's it, you've got the investigation, it's done. But my editors were like, no way, guys, you're not near the end of that investigation. You need to find where it happened and you need to find the perpetrators. So often that's another element. They really want us to combine all the elements, so we nail the perpetrators and the people involved in wrongdoing, not just make some findings, which is a bit annoying at times as well, because there's so many great findings that we're not able to publish. So we've got 2 elements: so availability of open source, and information out there. The level of wrongdoing we are investigating, and whether we're able to nail the people. And one big one for us as well is, because we're a documentary unit, it needs to be visual. And often we find that so many stories are not visuals, and so for us it doesn't cut it, which again is also super frustrating at times, because
Can you give us an example of one of the stories that might be interesting but not necessarily visual? I mean, obviously the Anatomy of a Killing, there was a lot of photos and videos of that. What's an example of something that would not necessarily meet that threshold but still would be OSINT interesting?
So without getting into the detail, because I can't, that sort of stories that haven't made it, I wouldn't be able to go into the detail, but there was one case I can mention where it was quite interesting stories about the involvement of some mercenaries in some country providing training to a special force within an African country that has been involved into sort of that military unit has been involved into the killings of innocent civilians. But we didn't have any, like, we had, in a way, we sort of, when we started looking into that story, we had a lot of paperwork, about who the people were, what type of training they would provide to this, what type of training they would provide to this special military unit. But we couldn't find any picture of those guys. We couldn't find any, we couldn't geolocate where the training site was. So we're missing a lot of those visual elements that sort of prevented us from making a film, because otherwise the story was juicy. Another one where we struggle quite a lot is Mozambique as well, with the insurgency and the insurgency allegedly connected to the Islamic State. There are quite a lot of visuals, but there it's hard to know, what's the story, what's really going on the ground. We find it very difficult to build a strong narrative.
So you use a lot of different OSINT techniques in your investigations. I've seen you guys look into social media and geo and chronolocation and things like that. So is there something that is like your personal favorite to actually use or conduct research on?
So I'm more into, I would say myself, I'm more into sort of social media and geolocation and chronolocation. I think it's quite interesting also, like working with Benjamin Strick and Bertram Hill, the two other open source investigators. Our skills are very complementary. So Ben is really techie, is really good at sort of automating OSINT. Is really brilliant at that. Really heavy on satellite imagery analysis, military weapons. That's where he's strong. Bertram, that we call him Bertie, but Bertram is a fantastic open source investigator. Like, it's insane. He's a machine. You give him a task and he'll go down into the rabbit hole and will produce a report with so many details. That's like, it's very good. And I think myself, I see it like in a bit of in between Bertie and Ben, and I focus more on like the social media aspect of open source investigation, a bit of geolocation. I did also some military work on military analysis, whether it's about weapons. But that's where I am like more. I like touching. Basically, I like touching all bits of open source investigation techniques and tools, and I'm not super specialized into any of them. One I would really like to improve is OSINT, automating OSINT. That's someone where it would save us so much time, and I'm really a loser when it comes to Python and scripting. I'm really I can copy and paste. That's pretty much what I can do, and kind of start to understand a bit. But I really want to get better. When it comes to scraping a lot of data and then being able to analyze it. That's where myself personally I'm weak.
So when you just discussed that, because open source intelligence in general is a time-consuming process. And from my experience, when it comes to journalism, it always has to go way faster than I was used to doing within law enforcement, for instance. You'd have months, if not years of times to investigate something or someone. Within BBC and the African Eye team, how does a typical work week or month look like? How do you work? Do you have time? Do you have to be in an office? Because open source intelligence, the information is there 24/7, right?
Yeah. So what's good is our editors understand that about open source investigation and give us a lot of flexibility into when we need to be in the office, when we work. We can obviously sometimes it's exactly that's what happened with open source investigation. You make a findings also. And you're so into it that, okay, it's 2 a.m. in the morning, but you're going to keep going until it gets 4 or 5 a.m. and you're going to keep working because you want to get to the bottom of it. So in terms of time, we need to go to the office, but the editors understand that there will be peak of sort of moments where the investigation peaks, and that can happen in the middle of the night. And so if we don't show up the next day at the office, that's because the night was quite intense in terms of open source before. So they're pretty flexible when it comes to time. And in terms of length of investigation, it's true that we have some, we kind of need to deliver. And also with Africa, we need to deliver 20 investigations per year. That is a lot of making documentaries from 30 to 60 minutes. That is a lot of investigation to produce per year. So we do, there is, in terms of the deliveries, there is a pressure, but our editors are quite good at enabling us giving us room to sort of try to have investigation that we can do. So we try to have multiple investigation at once. So one or two that can be done, we know can be done fast, and we know we can make the findings quite fast. And then sort of in the background of those, we go what we call those long-running investigation, where we can spend 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, maybe up to a year on it, and sort of keep monitoring. That's why it's good. They give us the freedom to keep monitoring, but it is quite tough, and there are a lot of stories that we had to drop because we will get into huge rabbit holes and
Yeah.
they would just, the story wouldn't make it for Africa. So then when that happens, we try to either give it to other parts of the BBC, or sometime, you know, like if we can publish something on Bellingcat, we try with the editor's approval, obviously, but we try to do if possible. Ben has been publishing like the boat analysis is done on West Papua. That was, you know, on his free time doing that, and obviously BBC Africa couldn't publish that, but you know the rest of the BBC could, another unit in the BBC.
So because BBC is doing open source intelligence, we have some other major news outlets starting to do open source intelligence. What limitations do you foresee for news outlets bringing in people like you and others like Bellingcat to become more mainstream when it comes to journalism?
I think it will. So it's interesting. We see, and I see that also. We see that within the BBC. But the first one that's becoming more mainstream is verification units. So across media organization, they're really starting and going big into, you know, misinformation and fighting misinformation, disinformation, setting up verification unit. The type of open source investigation that Bellingcat does is still quite fresh and quite new. So in the world right now, we have the New York Times visual investigation led by Micah Hoffman, where Christian Tribut is working. We're the first to pick it up and to actually start implementing open source investigation done in similar like that Bellingcat does, and implement that into journalism. I think sort of BBC Africa, it might have been second or third, but that is still quite new. And it's interesting because I think some journalists still don't quite understand, you know, the potential of open source investigation. They see, you know, Anatomy of a Killing, or they see MH17, or they see pieces that, you know, that New York Times visual investigation have done, like one bomb, one building about chemical attack in Syria, and they get really excited and they're like, okay, this is amazing, I want to do the same. But then you realize they just don't know how open source investigation works. They don't know the time you need to get. They don't know the expertise. And also I think there's really that community in open source investigation that is so well, you know, connected and bond, and where I think you need, like, in order to be able to start an open source investigation in the type of Bellingcat, you need to recruit people that are part of that community, that understand the language of that community, that understand the type of tools and techniques you use. And at this stage, I think it's still quite limited, the amount of people who are able to you know, who have all of this and combine all of this. So it is, I don't see open source investigation, the type of Bellingcat does, going quite mainstream yet. It will slowly, but for now, they're still focusing on verification and quick turnaround. And because journalism, as you say before, Nico, is pretty much focusing still on a quick turnaround. You know, we need to go fast because investigation costs money and they're long. So that will take time, but hopefully in the future, I hope that will happen. More units like that get set up.
So I think for me, myself, I'll have one last question, which I really wanted to ask, and I basically ask everyone. When you started out, well, we all have hurdles to take when we learn this. When we learn this field, what tip would you give to someone starting out doing open source intelligence? I
think, like, and I was the same. Like, when people start in open source investigation, I was exactly the same. Like, people are really focused on the tools. Like, the brain goes into the tools. I need to understand the tools. I need to use, you know, it's tools. It's all about tools. If I don't understand, if I don't use tools, I'm never going to be good at open source investigation. And that's so wrong, because you shouldn't let yourself controlled by the tools. It's really, there's patience. If you're patient and dedicated, you know, that's what you need. And, you know, and be willing to spend fucking huge amount of time on the computer, because that's what it ends up being. And that's also patient. But if you've got that, you know, you can be an amazing open source investigator, because you can learn any tool. Like there's no tool that's impossible for you to master in open source investigation. They're all easy, they're all accessible. They're of different degrees, obviously, but they're all accessible to anyone. So it's really, don't get yourself stressed about the tools and not understanding the tool. Like, just, you know, be patient. And start with small findings as well, and, you know, like, easy, like, yeah, often I find, like, same, like, and coming back to tools, I find that I end up using the same techniques over and over again, simple tricks, because to catch, I don't know, people involved in wrongdoing, because they're always stupid, and most of, like, so many people online, always publish so information. And sometimes it's the easy tool or the easy techniques that will get you further away than the very complicated tools and techniques. So yeah, don't stress over the tools. You don't need them. You basically, you sort of, your brain is the main tool, and then you can use those to complement that.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're my
Nico's
friend.
been-
Yes.
Nico's been
OSINT is a
saying-
mindset, yeah.
Yeah.
Mindset, yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you know what? When you're starting out, it's easier to focus on a discrete tool and learning whatever tool it is than to try to jump into the mindset and understand how things are connected. Those connections, I think, of I could do this, now I have this bit of data, now I can do that. I think that comes with experience, and people can't just get that initially. And so I get why people want to learn the tools and want to learn Linux and stuff, or Python. But also, you're absolutely right. It's that inquisitive mind, that detective work that you can do. Matthias,
And if I would just want to add another quick one as well, is also, and that's really fast, sorry, but it's just, it's okay to make mistakes as well in open source investigation. It's like often, and that's what I love about the open source community is people are so kind online. Like even if you make a little mistake, they're not gonna, discard you and rip you apart. They're gonna try to help you. And it's really that, it's okay. We all make mistakes in open source investigation. It happens all the time. Well, not in BBC Africa investigation. We fact check those, they're good, but we've made mistakes before, and we made sure that we fact check them in order to, not.
Well, and making mistakes before you do your final report, that's one thing. But especially in the work that you're doing, in the MH17 stuff that Bellingcat's doing, if they identify the wrong people, that could have a devastating effect.
Yeah, no, you can't make mistake at that level. Like exactly in the pre-investigation, but once you get to the final report, it needs to be bullet like super strong. Exactly.
Matthias, do you have another one?
Just
question?
one more question. I was so fascinated listening to what you had to say. I kind of forgot to ask this question before. But obviously speaking French and English, you're pretty well set up for doing investigations in Africa. But what do you do when it comes to like certain African French dialects or certain languages down there that are not that common? Is there anything you use to go to translate, or do you really rely on someone that actually speaks the language?
That we end up always relying on people who speak the language and underground sources, because we found out that using obviously those are languages that still Google Translate or other tools are not so good at translating, and they're getting better. It's getting better, obviously, but we still always go to sources or people who speak the language. But that is for sure. You've highlighted one of the points where we're quite weak is we still tend to do our investigation mainly, and the information we gather tends to be mainly English or French or the main language of the country. But in terms of dialects or local languages, or there we are a bit weak, and we need to get better. That's for sure. That's a very good point, actually.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us. I want to be respectful of your time here too. Thank you so much for being with us, Ayom, and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it. And we always ask our guests one last question. What is something that you're looking to learn? And I think you've already said Python, but I want to give you an opportunity to tell us, what in OSINT are you looking to get better at?
Definitely. Thanks for that question. Definitely automation, automating OSINT is one where I need to improve. And that is, going through, I want to learn how to use Python, how to script, and how to be able to analyze mass of data much faster than I'm doing that at this stage. And I also hope that one day the sort of Facebook graph will come back to life or something similar, because we're missing it so much.
I think we all are.
Such a struggle.
Yeah.
So
start a crowdfund for that.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope that
he could use the money, Mark.
I hope that one day that will come back, or that there will be another tool we can learn about.
Who knows?
But again, that's what's wonderful with open source investigation. You never stop learning. There's always a learning curve. So that's amazing as well.
Yeah. Well, for those of you that don't know, Ayom's web page, our Twitter page is right here. And don't look him up by name necessarily. The Twitter handle for him is YAOLRI. Is that some kind of a short name or something that you use, or is that just some?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's a mix of like it's like end letter for my last name and then first letter for my first name and then same back and forth. So it's like YAOLRI. So simple. But I've never used it apart on Twitter.
Why didn't you figure it out already?
Yeah, of course. I wrote a Python script to do it. God. Well, thank you so much for that. And I think at this point, you're welcome to stick around. I know that you said that you have to drop off. Well, whenever you need. A bit. Thank you very much for being on. And now we're gonna go ahead and move to the news. Now, before we move to the news, I did want to just mention one thing, that we have several new Patreon patrons, and we really appreciate them. John B., Access OSINT, and a couple others that haven't given me permission to call out their names yet. But thank you to everybody that helps support our project, because without you, this would be a lot harder.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and take a look at this huge, amazing free resource that has been all over the Twitters. Nico, you want to talk about the Verification Handbook?
Well, I want to. It's the second version. Well, it's the second version. There has been a Verification Handbook for years out there, PDF, translated into several languages, and this is basically the new version of that, which a lot of community people help to feed. So, for instance, Bellingcat, Hank Finesse, some others, Craig Silverman, and some others gave input. And not only input, they also gave case studies to go by. I think you're now showing the older version.
No, this is the book too.
This
is the newer one.
Yeah.
But you can download each of these.
Yeah, you can download,
which is awesome.
And what I really particularly liked about the new chapter, you'll have new case studies. And I think most people understand more about case study than just throwing, like Aliam just said, you can throw them a bunch of tools and tell them this is a tool to reverse lookup images. But if you don't know the purpose of a reverse image search tool or how you can use it in a certain state of mind, there's no real use for it. And well, almost every section within this book has a case study. And that's the part where I'm particularly a fan of, because that's where you really learn in depth how to use and how to think like an OSINT professional. So if you're in this field, you probably already checked this book out. And if you're starting in this field, I would say this is some of the top 3 tools where you initially go to learn from for free.
Well, and it speaks to what Jan was saying, is that, you got to get in the mindset, but you can't just jump to conclusions all the time. Verifying, validating sources, and making sure that the information that you got is not tampered. Because we all know about this person does not exist.com and this cat does not exist.com. There are computers making up. See, I threw that in there for you, Technisette. I knew you'd like it.
Probably.
I mean, the computers are making up stuff that is published to the internet, and we're like, wow, if we take it at face value, it could really lead our investigations in different directions. So, yeah. Well, and I mentioned Benjamin Strick, and actually recently to this article or this tweet. Do you want to talk about it, Jan? About what he released, or do you want us to do that?
I can mention a bit generally, but I'll get then you guys into the detail. But yeah, he's done like a sort of, he had done the same. Actually, the book that you just the verification book that you showed before. There is one case, the case I was mentioning about West Papua, bot network analysis on Twitter. There is one of this case he worked on with another investigator and has published, and he did the same here. But he's looking into a sort of bot network on Twitter targeting a Chinese businessman. If that is that's the one he published. Yes. And sort of what he'd done is he had scraped and over a certain period of time scraped all the tweets mentioning a specific hashtag, targeting two hashtags, I think, targeting this businessman, and then exported that data and put into Gephi in order to look, who is at the heart and who are the boats at the heart of that network. And what I love about those is it's visually beautiful, and the open source is also amazing.
Yeah, and what I really like about this, and also the previous work he had done with scraping Twitter and using Gephi, that he can use the initial Twitter data to pivot into other platforms and sources where the same campaign is ongoing. So you initially find it on Twitter because Twitter is fairly easy to scrape and fairly open to get information from, and then you get pivot points, let's say URLs or links to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, to see that that same campaign is ongoing on other platforms, and then you can expose that and that kind of stuff. So yeah, really awesome work here.
Yeah, Ben does great work. And one of the things that you should know is his Twitter handle is Bendo Brown. Great researcher, and I just love the way he writes too. It's just really easy to read.
Yeah.
Let's move to another OSINT prominent person, Matt Edmondson. He's a SANS instructor and just an amazing dude. He spoke at the OSINT summit several months ago. And one of the things that he did is he is also one of those technical people that can make complicated topics really understandable. So what he did was he wrote a blog post here about how to use Amazon's web services, the AWS platform, which is much more than just computers that are being stood up for you to install your tools on. Amazon has an amazing bunch of services that can be good for us to use. And they're complicated. Matt breaks it down in this article, Nation State Quality OSINT on a Taco Bell Budget. And he talks about some of the different tools that you could use, like Recognition, which has been around for a while, which is their image and video analysis service, similar to what Matthias showed us that Microsoft has in Azure. And there's other systems. And Matt goes through and shows you step by step what you need to do. And really, there's his face. And really he does a great job of breaking it down and show you why you might want these different platforms. So really helpful, especially for us semi-technical people. All right, so how about facial recognition with Python and Elasticsearch? Matthias, was this something that you tossed into our notes?
Yeah, I looked at this. So Lorenzo Romani is an OSINT analyst in Rome. And he's also more on the technical side, and every once in a while shares something regards to Python and things like that. And he shared something that I haven't tried out yet, but it sounds very promising, is basically setting up like your own image database, your own image server, and then using a specific Python script to do a image recognition analysis. So you kind of input a certain image, and then say, hey, go fetch me images that look alike, and it will basically give you kind of like a percentage of similarity. And so basically with that score there, anything above 70%, it's good chances that it's a match. And I remember several cases in the past where a tool like this would have been really handy. And if I'm not mistaken, Ayom, there was also something where we were looking into some kind of elections or military in Congo or something like that, where someone also had the idea to scrape a whole bunch of pictures from Facebook and try to find people. So one of the Slack channels, I remember when we had that project, I'm like, that'd be so cool if we could have something like this on the local machine. So definitely something I'm going to try out soon.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Google had Picasa and you could do that, they were doing that kind of local facial recognition. I love that. And then that product went away.
Speaking of which, what would happen if you would upload all these pictures to your iPhone? Because your iPhone does the same thing, right? Kind of misusing the iPhone, image database for that?
Yeah, why not?
Well,
why don't you give it a try and let us know how it goes? No, but I mean, using mobile devices like that using the features, that's absolutely in scope. And while we're on it, let's talk about something that could help people with what is the next step in their OSINT work. A lot of people that are just starting out don't understand where to start, what to do, or what to do with the data that they get. And Matthias, I think you also found this resource, is that right? Where, hey, you find an email address, you can run searches for the email, run searches.
Yep. So this is, similar to what you did with your Orcs yoga, basically just to give people an idea of how to start investigations with certain data points in a very, very simple way. So if someone is just completely new to OSINT, this would also be something that I would point out and say, have a look at this, have a look at your yoga, and just from there, move on and pivot on the different data points you have.
Cool. Thanks for mentioning my tool. Yeah, I created yoga for a while ago, and you just essentially click on whatever you have, like you have an image, and it'll say, hey, do this or do that. Just helping people get that next step in their process. And that's at yoga.osint.ninja. And the other is at osintessentials.com.
Yeah, that's Owen Sweeney. We had him on last year, I think.
Uh-huh.
So a very, very well curated site as well, the OSINT Essentials site. Just
to make this more of the Matthias Wilson show, why don't you tell us about this awesome web post that you just released a little while ago?
Yeah, that happens when I wake up too early on a Sunday morning and I have some free time. No, just in a nutshell, there is the World Intellectual Patent Organization, which has their own database on patents. So if you're conducting company research, you might want to look up this company in the worldwide patent database, and you can find some more information on them, maybe information on where is their primary market, since they would register patents there first. You'll also find individuals that were that registered the patent or mentioned as inventors, so you can kind of link individuals to each other. They also have a trademark and design database, a global trademark and design database, which you can look into. And that's the most important or relevant part for me, is that they have their own reverse image search when it comes to trademarks. So anything that is registered worldwide, you can upload an image and then kind of give it a certain fuzzy logic with certain settings, and it'll just run off and fetch that trademark belonging to that company logo or something like that. So, if you're into corporate research, don't forget to look into that patent database, that trademark database, but also at the same time, since it's a secondary source, always go look into the primary sources in that in the respective country itself as well.
Excellent work, my friend.
So one question for me: would this work when you are doing you have the Interpol and Europol when they put out those pieces of information about child abuse, and you often see company logos on, let's say, T-shirts or mugs or whatever? Do you think that could work with this?
If you go back to the webpage and go back down to the section where you can see the screenshot of the reverse image searching, you'll see that they have several different settings to kind of add a fuzzy logic to that image itself. It could work, but there's never a guarantee. And what this also does, so you have pick a strategy, and there it says image determined by AI to contain similar concepts. Then it goes by shape or color as well. So the AI just dissects the image by the shape or color and does things like that. And then also the field on the right with verbal, non-verbal combined is just additional information. Is there text in there that can be OCR'd or not? And with this logo, actually, it put out, I think, 200 results in total, if I'm not wrong. I'd have to check that up, or that was 1 to 30 on that page. So it put out a lot of different results. So if you play around with it, it will show you more than the original image you're looking for. So it does have a certain fuzzy logic that might work exactly for that use case.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Need to try that. Thank you.
Well, and Dutch, you've been doing some of your own OSINT investigations, and you've been getting into the world of birding. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, once you're inside for weeks, you start to look out of your window and you'll see birds. No, honestly, this started because I'm currently in the development and writing of the new SANS course, the advanced OSINT course. I'm writing it with you and John Turbis, Micah. And I was looking into new ways to find out, to look at temporal information of regions. So I initially thought, my brain was like, well, birds are only in a certain area for a certain amount of time, let's say spring or winter or whatever, and they fly to other areas. So what if I see a picture or hear a bird in a movie clip on YouTube from which I know that was posted in, let's say, March, but I'm not exactly certain where it was? Well, here you have a database, a website where you can look up the characteristics of a bird, but also the sound it makes, and see where that bird is seen at a certain time a year. So not saying that it would work in every case, but it might work and it might help. So, and I just like birds, man. Who doesn't like birds?
That's terrific, man. And you know, it absolutely can be one of those things that helps if you have a clear enough video or a clear enough picture of a bird, or you can hear it. Yeah, that's pretty neat stuff.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other things that we wanted to mention was the image operation meta tool. Some of you might have noticed that OSINT Curious is tweeting out a lot more things, especially some of these cool questions like, you know, what's a single tool that helps you day in and day out in OSINT? Now, some of us know that your brain is the best tool, right? Am I right? Yeah.
Yes.
But some people are actually
Definitely.
yeah, some people are actually putting in tools, and one that was mentioned was the image ops tool, which helps with reverse image searching. Has anybody used it, Nico or Matthias? No.
I looked into it, and it basically gives you the chance to upload images or to take a URL and then query the Baidu, Yandex, Google, Bing reverse image search, and has a couple other neat tools in it as well, as like extracting EXIF data and things like that. So it's you know, one place to go to get all your image related things done, but in most cases it does actually direct you to the original site that performs these operations. But pretty neat and a nice overview for everything related to images.
Cool. I was going to pull a picture and throw it in there, but that's imgops.com. Give it a try.
Yeah.
We don't know who owns that site, do we?
No.
So you might not want to upload your sensitive pictures with that in that location. Shadow Dragon. Matthias? Nico?
No, I think I added this one.
All right, Nico.
This popped up in my timeline, I think it was on Twitter, and well, I tuned in because I like to listen to podcasts and I don't commute anymore, so this is my way of commuting on my own in my own home, listening to podcasts. And this one is with Blake Butler. He gets interviewed by Daniel Clements of Shadow Dragon, and they have a conversation about open source intelligence and the InfoSec community. But what I found particularly interesting about this podcast, you get an insight in the way these people think investigative-wise, and that's really valuable. And Blake Butler does the intelligence part for PayPal, for instance. So he'll give you insight how they find people who do financial crimes within their company. And I found it really interesting as an open source intelligence researcher to learn from their perspectives and their way of looking at the cyber realm in general. So this was very OSINT-y. They also go into crafting personas and keeping personas on live, and the ethics on do you engage with individuals online to gather information. So just in general, I think it's worthwhile to check it out.
Yeah, and we've talked about several of those more sensitive things that you have to think about before you start your assessment on here as well.
Yeah.
And Nico, while I'm talking with you, tell me about Ali Seeks.
Yes. This one was shared by, I think, Blau on, which is a Dutch term, on Twitter. He pointed me to this one. Well, if you're doing IP infringement searches, this website called Ali Seeks, which is a spin-off of AliExpress, the known big, large Chinese like Amazon-ish platform. And there's a lot of false fabricated stuff, and there's fake Nike, there's fake Adidas, there's fake of everything. And this is just a really good tool which might help you find that seller or that people who are doing fakes. It would
They don't have fake everything.
It would be so awesome if there were fake me's online. Like, there's a fake Nico online.
Well, I mean, some places have fake Nikos, right? I guess.
Point me towards them. I will buy them all.
Well, Micah, if you would wear glasses, you both would look alike. So there you have your fake Nico already.
Oh, I'm missing my other buddy, my the third bald member of OSINT Curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One good thing about AliExpress, by the way, and we have a Dutch platform called Marktplaats, which is similar to eBay. I'm not quite sure if eBay has the same feature, but Marktplaats and AliExpress both have a feature where you can take a picture of something you're looking for, and they will reference it towards the database to see if they have an item which matches what you're looking for, which is great, because if you find an object and you have no clue what it is or no clue where it's being sold, take a picture with the AliExpress app on your phone, or I'm not quite sure if you can upload it to the website, but it works on your phone quite well. You take the picture and it gives you similar products for sale. So you might be able to find the seller of a product you're looking at, or you can identify whatever you're seeing in a picture or a video.
Cool.
It's quite cool.
And just going back a little bit, 89 Kenny, who's one of our attendees this week, mentioned that there's a website for birds in a picture. If you want to identify them, merlin.allaboutbirds.org/photo-id. We'll include that. Nico, if you could scrape that, and we'll toss that into the show notes as well. Thank you very much, 89 Kenny, for tossing that out there.
Yeah.
And you might have mentioned that our guest left us. He did mention that he had to leave earlier, and we thank Alium for being on here and just sharing his thoughts and experience with us. That was really, really neat.
Yeah.
So we're at the end of our webcast. You've wasted another hour with us here talking about OSINT. We do have the shameless self-promotion section. This is usually where most of our attendees drop off, but don't go, because we have Workshop Con that's coming up in next month, and I believe we're going to be offering a 20% coupon to get 20% off the price of tickets. And I think tickets right now are not in the early bird stage. I think it's like $550 for our one-day training where we talk soup to nuts about all things OSINT. And the cool thing is this is going to be 100% virtual. It will be on Eastern United States time, so I think 9 to 5, 8 to 5, somewhere in there. And it'll be Technisette, myself, and Matthias. I think you're going to be doing this with us. That's right. Yep. Kirby, Ginsberg, Ray, we've got a bunch of us contributing. So if you're looking to hang out with us for a whole day coming up in June, go ahead and consider signing up, and we'll get you the coupon code when we have that code.
This is your once-in-a-lifetime chance to attend a really good OSINT training in your underwear. I mean,
wow.
Just get really comfortable. I think that is a selling point.
I know. Yeah, I know I'll be wearing some.
Oh, yeah.
Nice job, Matthias.
I'm so glad cameras can be turned off.
Yes. Yes. Wow. All right. Other shameless self-promotion, Dutch OSINT guy, Nico Dakins, right?
Dakins, yeah.
Okay. If you stop calling her Technisette, then I'll start calling you Dakins. So,
Deal.
Nico Dakins, he and I are doing our Sec 487 class several times in the next coming months. You can get that on SANS. And one of the coolest things is our GoSee certification is back on track. And it is going to be launching in June. The beta is coming up this month. And we're going to be launching this international open source intelligence certification for my Sec 487 class. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, really excited.
How about you, Technisette? Do you have anything that you want to plug for this coming week or next 2 weeks?
Actually, no. I've been homebound, and I want to give a shout out to all the parents who are homeschooling their kids and stuff. So keep going, people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that takes a lot of energy, doesn't it?
Yep.
Cool. Well, good luck to you. Matthias, any last words?
Nothing special from my side. It was just a pleasure to have Ayom on this evening, and really enjoyed this episode with all the cool stuff that we discussed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great show.
Nico?
I have two things. 18th of May and the 9th of July, I'll be giving my workshop, Advanced Searching and Monitoring with Google for professionals. One is in Dutch, and the 9th of July will be in English. And more information can be found in the show notes or at awareonline.com.
Very, very good. Thank you. And I'd like to go ahead and thank our attendees for being here. I'd like to thank Ayom and Leroy for being here as well. This has been another webcast for OSINT Curious. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. Thanks for listening at home, and stay OSINT Curious. Yay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.